If you've ever wondered what it sounds like when a small town community turns its memories, stories, and everyday life into something meaningful, then Buzzy's Country Store podcast is exactly that kind of hidden gem you don't expect to find, but once you do, it stays with you. In a world where podcasts are often polished, corporate, and fast-paced, this one takes a completely different path. It slows things down. It breathes. It talks like people used to talk on porches, in kitchens, and inside small country stores where everybody knows your name. Buzzy's Country Store podcast is not about chasing trends or viral fame. It's about capturing something far more fragile, real community life. The kind that doesn't get recorded often enough anymore. The podcast is connected to Buzzy's Country Store, a local general store in southern Maryland, and it acts like an audio extension of that space. If the store is the heart of the community, then the podcast is its voice. From the moment you press play, you notice something different. There's no dramatic intro music trying to hook you in. No overproduced sound design. Instead, you get a calm, conversational tone that feels like someone inviting you to sit down and stay a while. It's not rushing you. It's not selling you anything. It's just telling you stories. And that's the magic of it. Most episodes feel like a mix of storytelling, casual conversation, and memory sharing. The host often reflects on life around the store, local happenings, and personal experiences tied to the community. Sometimes, there are guests, people who have lived in the area for years, or who have some connection to the store's history. These aren't celebrity interviews. These are everyday voices. Farmers, neighbors, longtime customers, and friends. What makes this podcast stand out is its emotional honesty. You can hear it in the way stories are told, not rehearsed, not overly edited, just spoken from memory. There's something deeply human about that. You hear laughter that doesn't feel staged. You hear pauses where someone is thinking about the past. You hear the kind of storytelling that doesn't happen on social media anymore because everything there is too fast, too filtered, too temporary. In many ways, Buzzy's Country Store podcast feels like a time capsule. It preserves small-town America in a way that's subtle but powerful. It doesn't try to romanticize rural life, but it naturally shows its beauty. The early mornings, the familiar faces, the stories passed down over generations, all of it becomes part of the podcast's rhythm. And that rhythm matters. Because when you listen closely, you realize this isn't just about a store. It's about identity. It's about how places shape people and how people, in return, shape places. The store becomes more than just a building. It becomes a living archive of memories. Every conversation recorded adds another layer to its history. One of the most interesting things about the podcast is how grounded it feels. There's no pressure to go viral. There's no attempt to appeal to a global audience. And ironically, that's exactly why it feels so universal. Because even though the stories are local, the emotions are not. Nostalgia, friendship, community, loss, and change, these are things everyone understands, no matter where they live. You might hear a story about a customer who has been visiting the store for decades, or a memory about how the town used to be before modern development changed things, or a reflection on how life feels slower, simpler, or more connected in certain moments. These are not big, dramatic stories, but they're real. And real stories often carry more weight than dramatic ones. The podcast also carries a subtle sense of preservation. In today's world, where everything is moving toward digital speed and short-form content, Buzzy's Country Store podcast acts like a resistance to forgetting. It holds onto voices that might otherwise disappear. It records stories that might never be written down. And in doing so, it gives them a kind of permanence. Another layer that makes it special is the tone of respect throughout the conversations. There's a clear appreciation for the people being featured. No one is rushed. No one is interrupted. The storytelling allows space for reflection, and that space is what makes the listening experience feel personal. It's the kind of podcast you don't just listen to, you sit with it. You might find yourself listening while driving, and suddenly you're not thinking about the road anymore. Or you might play it in the background and then realize you've stopped what you were doing just to hear the story properly. That's because it doesn't demand attention, it earns it quietly. There's also something very cinematic about it in its own simple way. Not because of production tricks, but because of imagery. The stories naturally create visuals in your mind: the wooden counter of a country store, the sound of a bell on the door, shelves lined with everyday goods, neighbors greeting each other like family. It paints pictures without needing to show anything. As the podcast continues, it builds something rare in modern media: a sense of belonging. Even if you've never been to Buzzy's country store, you start to feel like you know it. Like you've been there before. Like you've heard these voices in your own hometown, even if your hometown is far away. And that's the real strength of it. Because at its core, Buzzy's Country Store podcast is not just about one store, or one town, or one group of people. It's about the idea that every community has stories worth telling. And when those stories are shared with honesty, they become more than local history. They become shared human experience. So if you're looking for something loud, fast, or flashy, this probably isn't it. But if you're looking for something real, something that feels like sitting down with people who actually know what life feels like beyond the screen, then this podcast might surprise you. And maybe that's the point. In a world that moves too quickly, Buzzy's Country Store podcast reminds us that slowing down isn't a weakness. It's a way of remembering who we are. And that's something worth listening to. Like, subscribe, and share if you enjoy stories like this, and let me know what you think in the comments.